electronic devices, and at no time is anyone to approach the dais. If you would like to sign up for in-person testimony or have any other questions throughout the hearing, please see one of the sergeant-at-arms at the back. Chair, we're ready to begin.
Good morning, everyone, or I should say good afternoon. My name is Julie Menin, Chair of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection. Thank you so much for joining us for today's hearing. I first of all want to acknowledge my colleagues who are here, Councilmember Abreu and Councilmember Nurse. In recent years, e-commerce has transformed the way that New Yorkers shop for food, for groceries, and for other products. Delivery services were gaining traction before the COVID pandemic, but the pandemic certainly supercharged their growth as consumers embraced online shopping and delivery as a safe and convenient alternative to in-store shopping. Although the pandemic has subsided, the use of delivery services has not. Many delivery services rely on independent contractors to complete deliveries. When delivery services classify their workers as independent contractors instead of as full-time employees, they are not required to pay delivery workers minimum wage, overtime, or other benefits such as, of course, health insurance. In 2021, the Council passed a package of legislation to provide better wages and better working conditions for third-party food delivery workers. The largest segment of contracted delivery workers. These laws require the delivery services to provide delivery workers the opportunity to set a maximum distance per trip and the ability to decline to accept trips over bridges or tunnels, establish a minimum pay rate for third-party food delivery workers, and require that the food delivery applications include a provision in contracts with restaurants requiring them to make their toilet facilities available for delivery workers' use as long as the delivery worker seeks to access the facilities while picking up a food or beverage order for delivery. That legislation had an impact on pay. In the second quarter of this year, third-party food delivery worker pay per hour averaged $19.88, a 279% increase from the same quarter just a year prior, when the minimum pay standard had not gone into effect. However, the delivery worker legislation only covered those workers that contract with third-party food delivery platforms. The legislation we are hearing today will expand the protections we've afforded food delivery workers to cover all contracted delivery workers. Intro number 1133, sponsored by Council Members Gutierrez and Nurse, would expand delivery worker protections to cover all contracted delivery workers who deliver goods for a delivery service. Intro number 1135, sponsored by Council Members Nurse and Gutierrez, would require third-party grocery delivery services to pay their grocery delivery workers a minimum pay rate that would meet or exceed the minimum pay rate established by the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection that must be paid to food delivery workers. I look forward to this afternoon's hearing. I look forward to testimony from the Commissioner and the administration and other stakeholders who have come today. I'm now going to turn it over to Councilmember Nurse for her opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm proud to present Intro 1135, which is a straightforward yet critical bill designed to ensure grocery delivery workers receive a fair wage for their labor and achieve parity with other delivery workers operating under remarkably similar conditions. In my view, all delivery workers, whether they drive cars, ride e-bikes, operate trucks, whether they work directly for a company or through third-party platforms, deserve a standard wage that accounts for their cost as independent contractors and the lack of benefits they face. And just as a quick reminder, when workers lack health benefits or earn too little to afford health insurance, it is the taxpayer who shoulders the burden. And this is corporate welfare in action, a system where companies profit by exploiting their workforce while the public picks up the tab, and such a model is truly unacceptable and unsustainable. As consumer habits evolve, driven by rapid advancements in technology, it is imperative that our laws keep pace to protect workers in emerging economic sectors. What we can all agree on in this room is that the cost of living for low-wage workers in New York City has reached an untenable level. This legislation provides immediate relief for grocery delivery workers, and I look forward to hearing testimony from the apps later today that focuses on this urgent need. The numbers tell a very clear story. Over the past year, revenue for first and third-party grocery delivery services has surged by 45%. The number of delivery workers has grown as well, particularly since Instacart expanded its platform in 2022 to include individuals using e-bikes and mopeds. If revenue is increasing, it is only fair that the workers driving this growth are adequately compensated. Some have argued that grocery delivery workers should not receive the same protections as those delivering food from restaurants. However, the working conditions for these groups are strikingly similar. Both groups operate with minimal protections, often in challenging circumstances, and this bill seeks to close the gap and establish equity by guaranteeing wage standards and support that upholds conversation today. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you so much. So we are now going to call on representatives of the administration to testify. We will be hearing testimony today from Commissioner of the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, Vilda Vera Mayuga, Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Labor and Policy Standards, Elizabeth Wagoner, and Assistant Commissioner of External Affairs, Carlos Ortiz. And I'll now turn it over to Committee Counsel to administer the affirmation.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Good afternoon, Chair Menin and members of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection. My name is Vilda Vera Mayuga, and I am the Commissioner of the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. I am joined by Elizabeth Wagoner, our Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Labor Policy and Standards, and Carlos Ortiz, our Assistant Commissioner for External Affairs. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on Introductions 1135 and 1133 relating to the expansion of minimum pay protections and other rights to all contracted delivery workers. DCWP provides fundamental consumer and worker protections and financial empowerment programming in our city. In the past 3 years, we have helped deliver more than $1 billion back to New Yorkers. We strive to ensure that consumers who have been deceived or exploited have recourse, that workers have a passionate defender of their rights, and that all New Yorkers have the support they need to improve their financial health. Over a year ago, the city announced the nation's first of its kind minimum pay rate for third-party app-based restaurant delivery workers that apps classify as independent contractors. This has been the most significant investment of workers' rights in New York City in the 21st century. To implement this groundbreaking protection, DCWP conducted a comprehensive study of the industry and considered thousands of comments from delivery workers, apps, restaurants, researchers, elected officials, and other members of the public. Before the minimum pay rate was implemented, these workers received poverty-level compensation for their work, averaging approximately $5 per hour before tips. After we began enforcing the minimum pay rate, tens of thousands of workers saw their pay increase to today's average of $19.56 per hour before tips. This has resulted in apps paying their workers $500 million more than they did the year before. This money not only supports some of the lowest wage families in New York City, but also goes directly back into our local economy. My agency will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with delivery workers and ensure their rights to fair and dignified pay are protected. Moving to today's bills, I would like to enthusiastically commend the Council, and specifically Council members Nurse and Gutierrez, for recognizing that there are many more New York City delivery workers in need of DCWP protections. Introduction 1135 would immediately require third-party grocery delivery apps to pay their workers the current minimum pay rate. Introduction 1133 would require all other delivery services to meet minimum pay obligations for their independent contractors within approximately 18 months. after DCWP analyzes the industry to set an appropriate rate and pay method. The legislation would also extend other key rights to all contracted delivery workers, including the right to receive specific disclosures about trip offers before. Currently, the minimum pay rate only applies to independent contractors engaged by third-party food delivery services or third-party courier services that provide restaurant delivery. The law does not cover thousands of other workers classified by apps as independent contractors who perform deliveries of other goods like groceries and household items, who lack employee benefits, and who also bear the cost of the vehicles they need to conduct their work. This package of bills would close that gap, expanding minimum pay protections to cover at least 20,000 more delivery workers immediately and thousands more within 18 months, and creating a more level regulatory playing field for delivery companies. It would also allow DCWP to set a rate that appropriately compensates workers for the vehicles and for the lack of employee benefits. Finally, the bills would correct a 2023 misinterpretation of the minimum pay law, which resulted in an unfair exemption for Relay Delivery, a third-party courier service. This exemption allows Relay to pay thousands of its workers only $13.50 per hour, far below the $19.56 per hour required for other apps. In April 2024, Relay was acquired by Wonder, a delivery app that specializes in delivery from food halls that it manages. Wonder recently raised $700 million in a round of funding valuing the company at $3.5 billion. Wonder also recently announced a deal to purchase Grubhub. The judicially created exemption just for Relay unjustly enables this major industry player to evade minimum pay protections to workers' detriment. It also violates Council's original intention to cover all restaurant delivery workers classified as independent contractors with minimum pay protections, and to include companies like Relay that do not offer a consumer-facing platform. Delivery workers provide essential services to New York City and its residents, and we look forward to finalizing this legislation with the Council. We also continue to support Council legislation addressing issues such as unfair tipping methods and arbitrary deactivations on apps that prevent workers from accessing hours. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for your partnership in supporting working New Yorkers. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you so much. And before I begin my questions, I want to say we've been joined by Majority Leader Farias, and I'll recognize additional colleagues as they join. So a number of questions. So how many complaints have you received this year related to violations of delivery worker protections?
Thank you, Council Member. We have received total since 2022, 1,156 complaints.
And what is the most common complaint type?
The most common complaint relates to the pay, being paid below the minimum pay rate.
What percentage of the 1,166 would you say are related to that?
I would say about 50% is 452 complaints exactly.
And how are the complaints getting processed, and how long is it generally taking the agency on average to close out the complaints?
So it's going to depend on the cases. Depends on sometimes it's about just the minimum pay rate. Sometimes it's other laws that are also other protections that they're alleging violations, the workers. So we're going to take a look at those first and see if it's only one worker, a few workers, a lot of workers, because we will combine this, and that would impact how long the case takes. And then after that, once we ask for the information from the companies, the length may be impacted by how cooperative the company is once we request the records and engage with them in trying to resolve the issue. So it varies the length of time that it takes, just like it varies with other of our worker protection laws.
But is there a metric by which you could tell us? I mean, like for the MMR report, what is the metric of the average time it's taking to resolve the complaint?
I can say that, let me look at some information I have here. Last year, the median number of days to resolve than a year to work up
More
and
than-
resolve.
And what, I mean, obviously additional resources would be the answer, but what, if anything, would reduce the amount of time it's taking to resolve these larger cases?
Yes, thank you, Council Member. I mean, it is more resources. I think with this type of legislation, we are definitely so proud of all the work that we've done and how much we've accomplished with this groundbreaking legislation that we really thank the council, right, to have that vision to put it into place. And now to expand it as it should be, we definitely will need more resources for our team to be able to take it all in. We have a dedicated group of attorneys, investigators, data scientists that are committed to this work within DCWP, and we certainly want to make sure that we have the proper tools. So we will want to engage in that discussion with the City Council, with OMB, with City Hall to make sure that we can get what we need.
Absolutely. Now, what factors is the agency utilizing when they determine that a complaint then results in a full-blown investigation?
So every complaint that we receive, we do investigate it. So that's the first thing, and then it's going to vary. It's going to depend. We are going to look in terms of, is there a violation of the law? Is it only one worker that is impacted or multiple workers? We are looking at broader investigations to make sure that the company compensates all of the workers' harm and comes into compliance, and that we don't do it one by one, right? We can take them all in and look into any issues that are workplace-wide. And certainly we have received also some complaints where the worker may feel that there is a violation of the law, but there isn't. So we will take the time as another opportunity to educate and make sure that if there's a proper referral that is necessary because maybe it's a violation of another law, but that we don't enforce, we can also tell the worker where to go to resolve their complaints.
Now, I know you touched on this in your testimony, but if you could just repeat it here for the record. From the inception of the law, when it first went into effect, what is the total amount of restitution that you have recovered for food delivery workers?
Thank you. I think in the testimony where we're talking about the $500 million the workers have received in terms of restitution, we have been able to return to workers close to $30,000.
Say the last statistic again. You've been able to return
Almost $30,000 in restitution for violations of the worker protection laws.
How many workers does that cover? I'm asking because I thought that number would be higher. You're saying 30,000 since the law went into effect?
So yes, since the law went into effect, what I did highlight in my testimony is that $500 million have gone back into the pockets of
increased
New Yorkers
wages.
Correct, because of the apps paying the new minimum pay rate.
But the 30,000 in restitution, is that number so low because you feel compliance is high, or is that number so low because the agency needs more resources to be able to properly investigate the complaints?
Council members, so the number that we share, the close to 30,000, right? That is mostly going to be not the minimum pay rate cases. Those cases, we do have some open investigations. That's going to be the larger cases that are still outstanding that we're working through. So that amount of money is not going to really be reflected at this time.
But have any of the open investigations on the pay rate been concluded, or they're all still open?
We have a limited number of investigations on that issue of the minimum pay rate, and they are still open and pending.
How many staff members do you have working on these issues?
So we have just under 40 staff in the Office of Labor Policy and Standards. They're not assigned solely to delivery worker protection laws and their enforcement. That is for all of our worker protection laws.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about that 30,000 metric. It's very, very low, so I'd want to better understand why it's so low and what can be done to increase that number, whether it's an increase in if you don't have the staff that you properly need, because you're being asked to go and pulled into a lot of different directions, I know, on a lot of these labor policies. So that is of concern, so I want to better understand that.
I do want to also emphasize with this law, it was designed in a way, with the minimum pay rate specifically, it was designed to allow us to monitor compliance. And so we are receiving monthly reports from the apps where we're able to see exactly how much money they are paying workers, the amount of trip time, on-call time, et cetera, a number of statistics that show us that we are not getting in other types of enforcement that we do. And so it's with confidence that we are able to say that workers are being paid $500 million more or have received $500 million more.
Okay, so you mentioned the 30,000 and the restitution. What about civil penalties? What is the amount of civil penalties related to violations of the minimum pay law?
We are at 10,500.
Okay, so that also is low. So again, I would raise the same concern that about the agency's enforcement. The council obviously worked really hard on the passage and enactment of these laws. Now we've got to make sure that they're being properly enforced.
Thank you, Chair. And I think generally we have seen some compliance in this sector. That said, to the point that our Deputy Commissioner mentioned, I think we're actively monitoring folks. We have active investigations pending. Again, I think if we're expanding these protections as well, resources is an important question for us too, for ensure our capacity keeps up to pace. But I think certainly we've seen the amount of pay increase dramatically for workers, and when it comes to enforcement, I think we're going to keep a vigilant eye on these businesses to ensure they're complying.
Okay, I want to mention we've been joined by Councilmember Osei. So here we are having a hearing on these two laws. I guess the concern again that I would have is if we're going to expand the agency's purview in these new areas, we don't want to do it and then not have enforcement. So related specifically to these two pieces of legislation, how would you propose doing enforcement, given the resources you currently have?
We do need more resources. I think to be effective, I think it's important to remember, right? Any new mandate or any expansion, we are going to want to be properly resourced to accomplish the goal of the legislations. And we 100% support this expansion because we have seen during the last year what a tremendous positive impact it has had in the life of real New Yorkers on individuals receiving this increase in pay and make sure that they can have a roof over their heads and food on their table, right? So as we move forward, one of the key components of this legislation, as we know it right now, and that will be expanded, is the use of our data scientists, right? I mean, when we are proactively monitoring, we are not relying solely on complaints. We are requiring these apps to submit reports to us that show us the data that we need to have so that we can monitor and be attentive to any issues that we see raised. We have accomplished, those numbers that we shared before, yes, on the restitution and the penalties, and we are ongoing with some of the investigations. So we will continue to do this data-driven approach so that we can be vigilant as to any violations and take any proper actions. There are outstanding issues that we do look forward to address with this council as it relates to, for example, some tipping and like deactivations, things like that, that we want to make sure that are addressed as well. So I think we started with quite the legislation, groundbreaking, making an incredible impact and difference in the whole industry, all positive, and now we're going to keep adding to it together with the city council and address any issues that come up.
So would that then mean that you would favor a delayed enactment period for these two new laws to go into effect? Or the prior pay law did take some time for it to go into effect, for companies to be able to ramp up for compliance. Would you then recommend a similar treatment for these two pieces of legislation?
Absolutely not. We 100% agree with the bills as they are drafted with those timings. We have had these 1 year plus to look at the industry and already put into place the groundbreaking legislations for food service delivery workers. And now it's just a matter of expanding that coverage to other workers. There is no need to delay it as it is Intro 1135 to go into effect immediately for the grocery delivery workers. And then we are looking into the full suite, right, of the protections for the workers in all contracted delivery workers, and then at the 18-month when we would have, we have committed that we would have studied and issue any updated minimum pay rate for all contracted delivery workers. So we are confident that this is sufficient time and the bills is drafted.
Okay, a couple more questions. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, how many delivery workers have brought civil actions under the delivery worker protection laws?
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah, but that's right.
Thank you, Council Member. We don't have that number. Delivery workers not necessarily sharing with us when they file civil complaints.
Okay, okay. And how many more delivery workers in total will be covered by Intro 1133 and 1135?
So we estimate that at least 20,000 more delivery workers will be impacted immediately with Intro 1135. We don't know enough about all of the other areas to look and have a number to share at this time, but certainly thousands.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm now going to open it up to my colleagues. I do have more questions, but I want to be respectful and go to my colleagues. So, Councilmember Nurse.
I was just going to throw my name on the list. Thank you. I have some general questions, and then I just have a few. I feel like I'm not clear. How many investigators do you have within your agency to deal with these cases specifically?
Thank you, Council Member. We have 36 total in the team of the Office of Labor Policy and Standards. I'm sorry, doing enforcement. And that includes the investigators and also attorneys
Yes.
and our data scientists. So I can get you a specific breakdown if you want it, but that's the whole team that is doing. I don't want to just focus only on investigators because a lot of our investigation enforcement is very data driven. So we do rely on our data scientists as well, and obviously the attorneys, depending on where the cases are at. So it's like a whole team that is looking at this. Now, yes, those 36 are not only dedicated to the worker delivery laws, but also the other laws that we enforce.
What would you say is, if I was looking at a pie chart, what's the percentage of what your team is working on as it relates to the delivery workers and cases of wage theft around delivery workers? Like, is it a 50% of the work is being done by that team, or more or less?
It's hard to say exactly that way. I can say that the three biggest laws that we enforce are paid safe and sick leave, fair work week, and delivery. And delivery includes non-payment and minimum payment, but also obviously all the protections in those laws. I would say between those three categories, our enforcement staff is a little less than a third, and then there are, of course, other issues that come in as well.
Okay. I know that you all might be unwilling to say how many people you need, but I think in the follow-up, it would be really great just to have that number. Maybe you said it, I don't know if you did, but it would be really helpful just to get a concrete number. How many people would you need to take on all this? Because I imagine there have been a lot of challenges implementing the laws that you've already done. I have a question about that. But, we want to be able to support advocating for what you need, and really encourage you to consider putting that on the public record, if not now, at a future date.
we can share that later. I don't think we have it in front of us right now. Thank you, Council Member.
Okay. Can you just generally, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced with implementation of all these laws that you have passed related to delivery workers so far?
I would say the biggest challenge is actually the false narrative in the media that gets put up oftentimes by apps, sharing that there is a negative impact on the industry. But yet we have been reporting with the very data of the very same apps how the number of deliveries is still increasing per week. And I can't get away from that $500 million number of increase in pay in just 1 year for delivery workers. We're talking about $11 million more a week. That is real change in someone's life. So I would say that that is our biggest challenge, honestly, is just countering the false narrative. And, we need to keep fighting that to make sure that the workers know to come forward and understand what is that they should be expected from the companies that are contracting them for this work.
And what is your experience, if you're willing to share, of working with these apps and their willingness to sit down and come to the table or be proactive to protect their own workers who are generating such revenue for them?
Council Member, we've had varied experiences with the major players. I think it also depends on the issue itself that gets brought up. If I may, I can give you an example of something that unfortunately is not right now covered, but we do look forward to working with the council and addressing, such as the tipping, for example, right? The activations. Those are issues that I know we get it, Uber, DoorDash have proactively taken steps to remove options for consumers, and that certainly has impacted the amount that consumers tip. But yet, again, can get away with the $500 million, which we're happy because certainly we don't want these workers to be relying on tips for their livelihood. But it would be nice to not have to worry, and as a consumer, to just have the ease that there used to be for tipping.
So there have been a number of reports from delivery workers about deactivations from third-party food delivery service platforms. And can you just lay out for the public, what is deactivation and how, what are you seeing in terms of increases around this practice? Are you investigating it? And how do you determine if deactivation is considered retaliation?
I'm just going to have our Deputy Commissioner to give you the details on that issue.
So what we hear from workers are about a number of different practices related to not being able to access the app. Deactivation, what that usually means is the worker is cut off from accessing the app altogether and cannot get trip offers. We also see other problems, though, with accessing work hours, such as not getting preferential access to schedules, because of something that wasn't the worker's fault, like not delivering an order quickly enough, where, from the worker's experience, it might have been unsafe to, weave in and out of traffic to get the order there on time. And so, I think we are concerned about both of those types of things, which are related to each other, workers being able to get enough hours, not being penalized for things that weren't their fault.
And you think, and have you seen that as you've started implementing the laws that we've passed recently, this is growing? This is a growing practice?
We are not seeing, mass deactivations, which obviously was something that apps said would happen. That is not something we've seen. We are seeing a shift towards apps moving towards scheduling. Some apps were doing that before the minimum pay rate went into effect. More apps are doing it now. And with scheduling practices do come some more restrictions on app access. And we are hearing from the workers about that issue.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're now going to call on Councilmember Abreu.
Hey, Commissioner, just wanted to get on the record the administration's position on the tipping. We had a hearing earlier this year where you testified in support of our bill that would provide tipping at checkout. Is this something that still remains a priority for the administration?
Definitely, we still support those bills and would like to see the issue addressed.
Thank you very much.
Great. I'm now going to go back to Councilmember Nurse to finish her questioning.
Thanks. Just one more question. I had a question here about what does a pattern or practice of violations of delivery worker protections look like? So what triggers an investigation into a pattern or practice of violations? And has the city brought any actions for pattern or practice violations?
Thank you, Council Member. We have not brought yet any pattern and practice type of case, but that generally means kind of the literal meaning of the words, right? There is an action by an app that is impacting all of the workers in their workforce because it is just their practice to do so, and they will do so regularly. So if we have two options, right, for pattern and practice. We can certainly bring the cases ourselves if we don't resolve them, which we try to do through settlement, right? If not, we'll take the case to oath, and if not, we will work with the law department to bring a pattern and practice case in state court.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you so much. So I just have a sort of a question and a comment in closing. Following up on Councilmember Nurse's question, so about with the 36 members of the Office of Labor Policy Standards that are working, you said, in sort of investigatory roles, or investigators, or attorneys, or in data, it's still, I am concerned about the lack of resources, because certainly when I was commissioner of the agency and we launched a paid sick leave division, I know how much work has to go into those cases and how much time it takes to investigate and close those cases. And when you have to do that, fair work week, delivery worker pay issues, it is obviously, these are time-intensive matters. So I would recommend that go into the new needs, because if you're going to be getting anything on new needs, this would be a wonderful area to expand the agency's staffing. So I just wanted to close with that.
Thank you, Chair. And I think one aspect, I think we like to describe ourselves as probably pound for pound one of the most effective agencies in the city in terms of being able to deliver results for New Yorkers. I think you can see that in the Commissioner's testimony about delivering almost $1 billion to folks, or more than $1 billion to folks across our entire portfolio. And we only want to see that work increase and to make sure that we have the resources for that work to increase. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. That's it. Okay. Thank you.
We'll make sure we have folks watch the rest of the hearing too.
Oh, good. Yes, please do. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now going to open the hearing for public testimony. So I want to remind members of the public that this is a formal government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is permitted from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but they can, of course, submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant-at-Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant-at-Arms and wait for us to recognize you. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic. Intro 1133 and 1135. If you've got a written statement or additional written testimony that you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant-at-Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. So I'm now going to call the first panel. And if you could just please come up when your name is called. Ligia Golapa, Antonio Solis, I apologize, it's hard to read this card, and Alejandro Ganales. Please come forward. Thank you. Oh, okay, great. Okay. Yes, yes, they just told me, terrific. Okay, thank you. So please begin.
Ya. Buenos días, mi nombre es Antonio Martínez Solís y soy repartidor desde hace 4 años en Queens. Como parte de los Deliveristas Unidos y líder, he estado luchando para que las aplicaciones de reparto paguen un salario justo. Lo luchamos y lo ganamos. Entendemos la importancia de tener un salario mínimo y apoyamos la iniciativa de expandir este pago a los repartidores de grocery. Pero nos preocupa seriamente que esta legislación no incluye protecciones contra las desactivaciones ni exija transparencia en el pago. Es decir, que las compañías estén obligadas a explicar cómo calculan el pago, sin tener estas protecciones adicionales. Esto afectará negativamente las condiciones laborales de los deliveristas. Las propinas son esenciales para los repartidores de grocery y muchos dependen de ellas para complementar sus ingresos. Nuestra experiencia al lograr el pago mínimo es que las compañías comenzaron a eliminar la opción que el cliente tiene de dejar propina al momento de realizar el pedido, lo que resultó en una reducción de las propinas que recibimos. Además, las compañías han comenzado a limitar el horario de trabajo, causando caos, frustración y desinformación en la industria. El método de pago actual que utilizan la mayoría de las aplicaciones es el pago estándar, que solo garantiza el 100% del tiempo que estamos realizando entregas, mientras que el resto del pago por el tiempo conectado no es seguro y nadie entiende cómo la aplicación calcula este pago adicional. Las aplicaciones no dicen que para acceder al pago del tiempo conectado tenemos que mantener una puntuación y además tratan el pago mínimo adicional que la ley exige como un bono, que solo se obtiene si aceptamos todas las entregas poniendo en riesgo nuestra seguridad. Si la intención es protegernos contra las aplicaciones abusivas, necesitamos protecciones contra las desactivaciones, exigir que las aplicaciones nos informen cómo calculan
Okay,
nuestro
I'm just
pago.
going to ask you to please wrap up, and you're going to
Okay.
wrap up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Antonio Solis, and I'm a deliverista and also leader of Los Deliveristas Unidos, and I have been fighting for fair pay. We understand the importance of having a minimum wage and support this initiative to expand this pay to grocery workers. But we are seriously concerned that this legislation does not include protections against deactivations and requires pay transparency, and that specifically means obligating the companies to explain how they're calculating their pay. Without these additional protections, this will negatively impact the working conditions of all delivery workers. Tips are essential for grocery delivery workers who rely on these tips specifically when there is low demand. Our experience has been that when we achieved minimum pay, the companies eliminated the option of tipping for consumers at the beginning of the order, significantly reducing our income. Additionally, the companies started limiting our hours, causing chaos, frustration, and misinformation. The current paid method used by the apps is the standard method, which mostly 100% guarantees only the time that we're actively working. The rest of the connected time is not secure, and nobody really understands in the industry how the companies pay us. The apps tell us that in order to access this additional pay that the law mandates, which by the way they consider as a bonus, we have to have a high rating and we have to accept every order, putting our safety at risk. If the intention is to protect delivery workers from these abusive apps, we need more than just a minimum pay. We need real protections against deactivations. We need to demand transparency in making sure that we can guarantee and protect our flexibility. We look forward to working with you all to making sure that we bring real changes to all deliveristas and improve our industry.
Good afternoon. My name is Alejandro Grajales, and I have been a delivery worker for the past 9 years. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience. I fully support Intro 1133 and 1135, which would establish minimum pay standards for grocery delivery workers. However, passing these bills without additional labor protection would allow companies to continue exploiting workers by prioritizing profit over fair treatment. Delivery apps often underpay workers. pressure us to accept all orders and limit our ability to earn a sustainable living. As a leader of Los Deliveristas Unidos, I have fought for delivery workers' rights, including minimum pay. Still, my experience shows that protection against unfair deactivations, mandatory pay transparency, and safeguards for flexibility are essential. Without these measures, delivery workers remain vulnerable to systemic abuse and instability despite the promise of minimum wage laws. For instance, 2 months ago, DoorDash locked me out for my account after a delayed delivery caused by an unexpected breach opening. I informed customer service and the customer, who understood. Yet the app's algorithm unfairly penalized me. Despite appealing the violation, my account remains deactivated. This incident reflects how delivery platforms exploit workers through arbitrary systems, leaving us with no way to defend ourselves. These examples illustrate the urgent need for stronger labor protection. Companies prioritize speed and profits over workers' safety and rights, creating unfair conditions and pressure. While minimum pay legislation is a step forward, it must include protections that ensure fairness, transparency, and flexibility for delivery workers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you so much to that panel. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm going to call the next panel. William Medina, Luis Cortez, Daniel Ancampo. Please come forward. Thank you. Okay, please begin.
Good morning. My name is William Medina. I'm an organizing leader with Los Deliveristas Unidos, and I've been a deliverista in New York City since 2019. I'm here to support Intros 1133 and 1135 that we extend basic protection and a living wage to deliveristas who deliver grocery store goods. As independent contractors, delivery workers have to pay for our own vehicles, own operating expenses, own medical costs, on top of our rent and living expenses. As a deliverista, I can tell you how much we struggled to afford those costs before the minimum pay law was passed. And I can tell you how transformative minimum pay has been. It has allowed us to work without always wondering if we were going to survive, if we were going to have enough money to pay our expenses to do our jobs. The minimum amount needed to survive and cover our operating expenses is fair and just compensation because we receive no benefits or help from the app companies for our cost. All contracted delivery workers deserve such fairness regardless of the kind of goods we carry. While we fill in this loophole and cover workers who deliver grocery goods, we also need to fill in the loopholes that have allowed the app companies to avoid compliance with the minimum pay law since it began implementation. I see how multi-billion-dollar companies like DoorDash, Uber Eats, and others routinely try to avoid complying with the law by locking workers out their accounts so they don't have to pay our on-call time, by creating unjust scheduling systems to limit the amount we work, by deactivating workers to avoid paying and blocking our tips. As we extend minimum pay to grocery workers, we have to be prepared for how the app companies covered by this new law will also retaliate. Our concern is that Instacart and other companies will have a blueprint from DoorDash, from Uber Eats, and from others for retaliating and avoiding compliance with the new law. We need to have a blueprint too. We need to extend to all workers the tipping, pay transparency, and deactivation protection bills that have already been introduced, and we need to pass them now. Having the complete package to protection is the way to ensure company compliance and the success of the minimum pay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Luis Cortez. I'm the director of Los Deliveristas Unidos, LDU, the organizing campaign launched by the Workers' Justice Project in 2020 to protect the rights and safety of New York City's 65,000 app delivery workers. Thank you to this community for providing the opportunity to speak on this important matter. I'm here to speak in support of Intro 1133 and 1135. LDU is proud to have pioneered the historic protection for app delivery workers that are basis for the bill before this committee today. This is an opportunity to act urgently. The longer we wait to provide such protections, the more we expose these essential workers to needless risk and labor abuse. In particular, the minimum wage requirement through Intro 1135 will extend real material benefits to all delivery workers, regardless of who contracts them or what good they carry, just as it has done for app-based delivery workers who deliver from restaurants. Minimum pay is essential for delivery workers. As independent contractors, deliveristas struggle to afford their own operating cost while generating billions of dollars in revenue for the app companies. They do this without employee benefits, medical insurance, or safety protections, relying on themselves to purchase expensive vehicles and equipment to ensure their livelihood. We strongly support this bill as a critical extension of the right to a living wage for all delivery workers. However, our experience has taught us that the app-based companies will retaliate against any attempt at regulation. History has shown that they will find ways to skirt compliance with the minimum pay requirement, including by introducing opaque payment and scheduling system, locking out workers, deactivating them arbitrarily, and by making it harder for customers to provide tips. We must be prepared and respond to such retaliation, such as we have with DoorDash, Uber, Grubhub, by introducing bills around tipping, pay, and schedule transparency and deactivations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Dan Ocampo. I am an attorney at the National Employment Law Project, NELP, here in New York, and I'm here to testify in favor of both of these bills. As we've heard, the restaurant delivery worker pay standard has been a demonstrated success. Pay has increased significantly for this workforce, and demand for delivery did not collapse as some of the companies had predicted, and it turns out that these multi-billion-dollar companies can afford to pay their workers a minimum wage. As a result, New York City is one of only a handful of jurisdictions that's been able to enact meaningful protections for this essential and growing workforce who've been cut out of labor and employment laws by the companies that classify them as independent contractors. Now, New York should continue leading by extending these protections to grocery and other contracted delivery workers who are engaged in essentially identical work and who also deserve a pay floor. As we've heard, Intro number 1135 would extend the pay standard specifically to grocery delivery workers who would be covered under the existing standard, the idea being that it wouldn't require a new rulemaking from the department and so could go into effect right away. And Intro number 1133 would extend the protections to all contracted delivery workers, but would require a new rulemaking. And then just a quick word about the litigation over the pay standard. So just a few days before the initial pay rules were set to go into effect, Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, and Relay all sued the city. The lawsuits were essentially frivolous, claiming that DCWP had exceeded its authority under the legislation, which it didn't, and I think you'll agree. But it did throw sand in the gears and won a several-month delay and also an exemption for Relay. And those were months during which delivery workers continued to earn sub-minimum wages. I hope the companies affected by this legislation don't try to sue if it passes, but if they do, I think the language is much clearer in this bill and the legislative intent is made crystal clear. So with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you to this panel. Now going to call the next panel. Give me 1 second. Okay, this is the last panel, is Ruth Whitaker, Hassan Yadaberry, Raul Rivera. If you could all three please come up. Thank you. And we will, I'm just told there's also a Zoom panel that will go after. Okay, please begin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ruth Whitaker, and I'm the Director of Civic Innovation Policy at Chamber of Progress, a tech industry coalition promoting technology's progressive future and ensuring that all Americans benefit from technological leaps. Our partners include many app-based delivery companies, but our partners do not have a vote or veto over our positions. I'm here today to raise concerns about proposals to implement minimum pay standards for all categories of delivery workers without properly considering the downstream consequences. After implementing minimum pay standards for food delivery workers last year, prices increased for consumers and earning opportunities decreased for drivers. Expanding these standards to cover more drivers without a full understanding of their impact risks undermining the goals of these proposals. Minimum pay standards typically raise prices for consumers. After the city implemented its minimum pay standards for food delivery drivers last year, consumer fees increased by an average of 46% per order. Expanding the existing rules to include grocery delivery would likely have similar effects. Increasing the prices of groceries would be particularly harmful for the estimated 14.6% of New Yorkers who are food insecure, or those living in food swamps without access to fresh, healthy food. For these communities, food and grocery deliveries can mean access to a wider variety of healthier food options. Minimum pay standards also typically result in reduced earning opportunities for workers. Higher prices typically result in fewer orders and lower tips, which declined by 60% for food delivery drivers since December. The minimum pay standards for food delivery workers also resulted in food platforms instituting schedules to align driver supply with high demand periods. The combination of fewer orders and limited schedules can limit earning opportunities for drivers. One driver reported a 60% decrease in earnings since the pay standards went into effect. Nationwide, 69% of workers said app-based work helped them to make money in an emergency situation, and 63% said the income from app-based work allowed them to cover rising costs. Minimum pay standards also threaten the flexibility that workers value. App-based workers consistently report that the ability to control their own schedules is one of the most valuable benefits of app-based work. The city's analysis of minimum pay standards...
Okay, I'm going to ask you to please wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah. Our concern is that the flexibility will be eliminated, which is one of the primary benefits of delivery work, in addition to the other concerns as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Menon and members of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection, Councilmember Nurse and Councilmember Osei. My name is Hussein Yadaberry, and I'm the Executive Director of Muslim Community Network. I'm here to express our strong support for Intro 1133 and Intro 1135. Delivery workers are the lifeblood of New York City. Every day they transport our meals, groceries, and essential goods, often in the rain, like today, snow, or intense heat. They ensure that the city functions smoothly, and yet many of the workers are excluded from basic protections. Unfortunately, the narrow scope of the current minimum pay rules mean that some delivery workers are being left behind. It only covers food delivery workers on platforms serving restaurants while excluding grocery delivery workers. At MCN, we've heard from constituents who use a variety of delivery platforms. Many are frustrated by the disparity in the pay and protections for what is fundamentally the same work to them. Whether delivering restaurant meals or groceries, these workers face the same challenges: long hours, dangerous conditions, and limited access to safety resources. So passing these bills will create economic equity and safety across the gig economy. Intro 1133 guarantees workers basic protections, such as the ability to set maximum distances and access trip information and right to restrooms, while 1135 ensures grocery delivery workers and food delivery workers are in an even playing field when it comes to pay. Delivery workers, many of whom are immigrants or from underserved communities, deserve the same protections and opportunities no matter what platform they're working on. Chair Menon, members of the committee, these bills address a fundamental issue of fairness. By passing Intro 1133 and 1135, you will ensure that no worker is left behind and that all New Yorkers can earn a dignified and living wage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Raul Rivera. I'm a TLC driver and a TLC driver advocate with over 23,000 trips. One of the main problems we have here in the city with these apps is that our status as independent contractors are not being respected. When you have elected officials like Brad Lander and Jessica Ramos disrespecting the status, you're going to get deactivations time and again. I personally know a driver that almost hit 29,000 trips. 29,000 trips with Uber. Not easy to do. One complaint and he was deactivated. We asked that New York City eliminate these apps. They're exploiting the people of color. They're exploiting workers with a language barrier. It's been more than a decade that Uber's been around. We asked at the Committee on Transportation to remove Uber. We asked the Taxi Limousine Commission to remove Uber. Better pay is always good, but the status is not respected. And that's what's going on here. We're going to make our way down to Washington, D.C., and we're going to testify in Congress, and we're going to let them know that this council is not protecting workers.
Okay, thank you to this panel, and thank you. And now we're going to, on Zoom, we have one person who is signed up. I'll see if he is on. Christopher Leon Johnson. If you can hear us on Zoom. No. Okay, oh, so that's it. Okay, great. That concludes the public testimony. If we've inadvertently missed anyone who is registered to testify today and is yet to be called, please speak with the sergeant, or if you are remote, use the Zoom hand function, and you will be called in the order that your hand has been raised. No. Okay, seeing none, we are now going to close the hearing. Thank you all.